Welcome in my Microsoft Massive developers, architects, engineers, enthusiasts. We who are about to code salute you. A lot of subscribers have been asking me what software I use for my presentations. The quick and easy answer is that it's software that we built here at ThinkMind called Scribecast. We'll be publishing it to the Windows Store very soon, and then you'll be able to get your hands on it and play around. Send me an email if you'd like to be a part of the beta program and get your hands on the bits. Now, onto the video. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do an introduction and look at the statistics considered. The statistics considered for this exercise would be the steals, the assists, the points, the rebounds, how many MVPs they got, how many finals MVPs, how many championships. The formula, this is calculated by looking at your top 25 ranking for the counting numbers, steals, assists, points, and rebounds. And what we do is that we will take the top 20 or 25s, let's go with 20, minus your ranking. So for somebody like LeBron James with points 1, so you end up with 19. And then we multiply it by a factor. In this case, the factor for points is 10. So that would give a score for LeBron James in this case of 190. If you took Michael Jordan as an example, he is ranked 5th in scoring. So that would be 20 minus 5. So that would give us 15 times 10. And that will ultimately give us 150 good points for that particular category. And we'll do this for steals, assists, points, and rebounds. And then when it comes to MVPs, final MVPs, and championships, we're just going to do a count of what they have. So obviously, Michael Jordan has 6 championships. So that is 60. And he also has 6 finals MVPs, which are 20. So that is 120. So in terms of like championships and MVPs, he would have altogether 180. So next we go and we're going to create the Azure resource. And in this case, we're going to be creating an Open AI resource. That's what it's called in Azure. And then finally, we're going to encode it using Open AI. So we're going to take all the rules that we've just specified and we're going to encode it into the prompt and see the results that come out from there. We're also going to build a sample code application to illustrate exactly how that works, both on the website in Azure and also locally how you can consume it. And we're going to do the same thing using our own data. So the interesting thing about OpenAI is that it's the whole model is trained, and then when it's trained, it's put out there, and it actually doesn't take any new information in. So as a person like LeBron James is essentially history in the making with some of the statistics that he has, it may not make sense for us to use the model that has been trained, in which case we'd have to actually take our own data, compile it, and then put it onto the cloud and then let the engine use that when we're answering questions. So that's basically the steps. Let's get to it. Okay, so here we are in our demonstration resource group, and we're now going to create an OpenAI resource. Let's go in and create one. So you enter obviously the resource group, you give it a name, we'll call it B-Ball Code AI, specify a pricing tier. Now, there's not much else that you're doing here after you specify the pricing tier, besides basically selecting the networking that you want to use with this. As you already know, if we specify all networks, that means that basically internal and external resources can access this. If you specify that you want select networks to be used, then basically you'd be able to configure whether or not you wanted to use basically private endpoints to access it. And then if you specify disabled, then there's no access to it from internal or external networking platforms. So we click tags. We're going to create it. And we're done. Okay, so we select our B-Ball Goat AI. And then let's quickly go through all the things that are available to you when you create an OpenAI environment, what services you have available to you, what options you have, and how you can configure that. So, of course, up top, you have the activity log. This gives you a view into who has been using this resource, who has been modifying this resource. It's the same as with any other resource that is in Azure. You can use this to see what has been done to the actual resource on the Azure plane. We have our access control. Again, it's the same thing. This is where you set up your RBACs and your IAM. So this, on the flip side, is who has access to the resource and who's able to modify it. And again, this is the same across all Azure resources. You got your tags, so you can add additional tags here. We're not going to do that. And over here, we have the ability to diagnose and resolve problems. Now we have our key manager. So this is one of the things that you are going to need moving forward. Basically, the endpoint is used from an API perspective to say where you're going to connect to, and the key is passed in when you're actually trying to authenticate against this resource from code. Model deployments, everything you're doing here actually with the model deployments isn't managed from the Azure plane. It's actually managed in the Open AI Studio, the Azure AI Studio, which is a separate website that you use for managing this. So when you click this button here, it will actually take you to that website. Encryption, again, customer managed or Microsoft managed, pretty straightforward. Your pricing tier right now, this is in beta, so I'm not sure that there's actually any price associated with this. I think when this is finally launched, there will actually be, you'll actually be able to see prices. But in this for this iteration, there's actually no prices that show up here. Networking. So we already talked about this. And again, here you have the option to pick between all networks, select networks, or being disabled. Now over here, you can set up private endpoints. So if I select that, as you can see, here's now the firewall essentially that I have access to. So in here, I can decide, well, what client IPs do I want to have access to this? I can also use a CIDR range if I so desire. And then up here, you can specify the virtual networks inside of your cloud network that you want to be able to have access to this resource. Identity is pretty straightforward. Again, system managed, user managed identity. This is the context by which the resource is going to interact when it's interacting with other resources. Not much in cost analysis, so leave that alone. Look at our properties. These are all the properties that are tied to the resource. Locks. Locks have not changed. Again, it's a way for you to control access to this resource or modifications to this resource. Even if people have access to it, if you lock it, people won't be able to change it from the various channels that they're using to access the resource or modify the resource. Alerts are essentially the same. You can create alert rules based on various triggering factors. As you can see here, the signals can be number of errors, total calls, latency, you name it. These are all things that you can use to trigger an alert and then have an action associated with it. And then that action can email or put something into Azure Automation or what have you. Metrics, these are all the things that drive the metrics for your service. You can use this to monitor what's going on in your with your AI service, and you can actually attach alerts to this, and based on various metrics, do different things. So diagnostic settings, logs, nothing special there. A task view. So this is the same as any other task. This is going to be able to create sending monthly resource costs. Basically, that's where we're at right now for this. You can export the template. There we go. And this will just show you the full JSON that's going to be exported for you to be able to use to create using IAC. You can look at resource health, and then obviously you can do support and troubleshooting from here. So let's go ahead and let's actually now go into the OpenAI Studio. So you can see when you click it, it actually doesn't pop up in another window. It replaces Azure. So usually what I like to do is I like to right click and go back. So let's show that way. Actually, first of all, let's go down to the model deployments so you can see from here, and I'll right click and say open a new tab. You can see that it's still opening the same Azure AI Studio. So it's pretty much the same thing. So the first thing you have to do when you're creating an AI resource is you actually have to create a deployment for that resource. But one thing to be mindful of is that not all these deployments give you access to them. So if I try here now to use the GPT-4, you'll see that I don't have access to it. You can request access. You would have to make a request basically over here to have an adjustment to your quota in order for you to allow this GPT-4. Otherwise, you won't be able to use it right now. But the process is pretty painless to do. So we're going to just stick to GPT-3 Turbo. Okay, so this creates a deployment. And now that the deployment is created, we can go over to the chat and we can start basically playing around with it pretty much immediately. So let's close this down, give us a little bit more view. Minimize that. And then you're going to see a couple of things here when you get into the platform. Again, up here, you have like the chats. Over here is your completion. That's for like sentence completion and things of that nature. We're not going to be doing stuff with the images, but over there you have images. As you saw down here, you have your deployment. And when you're actually in this chat area, you have the ability on this section right here to basically create prompts. So this is the system prompt down here. You can see where you can actually enter how you want to prompt your AI. A prompt is basically the information that the AI interprets for it to determine how to interact with the user. You can specify that there. And over here on the right side, this is basically your area for testing. There's pretty much nothing special there. You basically just type the text in there, and then it's going to show up like a regular chat. So what you have to do is in here, we actually have to put in our prompt, put in the parameters for how we want the AI to behave, and then we're going to test it over here. On the right side, you can pick your deployment. You see that it's already selected Go Deployment. You do have to create a deployment, as you can see, before this will work. So we created one ahead of time. You can also specify the parameters, and then you can also specify some information about characteristics about number of messages. You can look at this as JSON. You can look at the code for it. This will show you the code in C#, in Python, in various languages, and then you can set some settings around your playground. And I believe that down here you can actually also use a voice to text, so you can speak your commands and then they'll be put in here and that will run the whole thing. So let's go ahead and type some stuff in here. We're not going to do anything too crazy, just to illustrate the capabilities. So you know the average cost of an MBA ticket is $100. And we'll also do something related to the time. You know that games start around 7 p.m. And then once we're done, we do have to actually save it. So we apply our changes right there. And it usually does take some time after you apply the changes for it to actually start working in here. So just keep that in mind, that you're not going to just click on that button and then it just starts working. All right. And here you can see that it's now done processing. And if I'm passing in how much does an MBA ticket cost, and it's returning me the average cost of an MBA ticket is $100. So that's coming from this right here where I specify that $100 is what the average cost of a ticket is. And you can see here's the next one. When do I need to get to the game? And you can see over here that it's saying that it starts at 7 p.m. EST. That's again coming from right there. So it's just my information that's being passed into it. And then it adds some extra stuff to make it more friendly, more conversational. But essentially, it's passing the information that we've provided in. So now that we've got our model built out on Azure Open AI side, let's go ahead and let's actually create some code to use it, right? Because we're not going to be using it from the website. So let's create some code when we use a console application. And the whole point of this is that it's going to basically be accessing whatever we've created and going from there. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is we have to basically add the NuGet packages that allow us to interact with OpenAI. And here they are, not much special there. Just save that and let's build just to make sure that everything is working properly. So as you can see, I've created nothing special here, no bells and whistles. It's just a .NET 8 executable that's running as a console application. That's all we have so far, nothing else. So let's go ahead and let's basically start creating the resources we need. And I'm just putting placeholders in here. Obviously, I'm going to need the endpoint. I'm going to need the key, and I'm going to need the deployment name. This is the information that you're going to need for you to be able to call the OpenAI service. So it's important for you to know where they are located inside of your Azure environment. So obviously the key is right here. Well, first of all, let's take the endpoint. We can see that that's right there. And then the key we can pull from here. Let's put that there. And then deployment name we actually get from over here. If we go over to the deployments, it's go deployment. But let's go ahead and let's go there and just copy that. And then we paste it here. Next, we're going to create a class that represents basically the call. So this is going to encapsulate everything in the call. So we'll take basically create a run method for it. And what I want to do here is rather than creating code directly inside of the main, I basically want to create the code outside of it, create a class. So here's going to be our main. And then I'm just going to have some code in here, our basic demo. And this is basically going to have a while loop. And inside the while loop, I'm going to read an input. Okay. And then I can check if the input is end, then I just end. Otherwise, I'm going to pass input to chat API. And then along with the input for the chat API, I also need to pass the system input. That's that input that we specify and bootstrap the chat with, right? So I'm going to put in here all the criteria associated with my algorithms, right? So I'm going to put some GOAT score info, right? that's going to tell the AI, here's how I want you to calculate the GOAT score. And then once that's all done, I'm going to call the service, right? And that's going to be return me a value. And then I'm going to then just display the value. So let's get to it. We're going to create the namespaces that we need so that we have access to them. And we are going to create our AI knowledge. This is the system information that's going to be passed in with our actual prompt. This is the actual system prompt that tells the chat what to do. And because we're going to be writing a lot of stuff, I'm just going to make that full string literal. So we are going to take parameters here. Obviously, we need to pass those parameters from the actual main program. So I'm just specifying it here. Now let's make a call to it. And then back in the run method, we're going to create an AI client. Okay, and there we go. We've got our client set up. Now we need to create our loop. And in our loop, we just need some prompt to indicate that what it is. This is not mandatory. This is just stylistic, I suppose. And what our prompt is going to do is going to read a line. We're actually writing. We're not going to be writing a line. We're actually going to be writing. So put a little, there you go. And if our prompt is end, then we know that we don't want to do the AI stuff anymore. So we're going to break out of the while loop. And then down here is where we're going to do all the real work, right? So we're going to need a chat completion options object. And then in here, we're going to specify the deployment name and the messages that we're passing into the deployment. And then our max tokens, use 800, our temperature, and the stop sequences. For message, we pass our AI knowledge, not AI endpoint. Oh, let's just copy that. There we go. And then we also need a new user message. So that's a system message. So up here, we've specified a system message, right? That's the key thing to remember. It's not the same type, system. And then in here, what we want is to say a user message, not a system message. And it's the prompt that we're basically going to pass in here. And we'll take that from the previous view and put it in here just so we can test it out. And we'll make some changes to it. So I'm just switching it from to $150 and 8 p.m. so we know it's different from what's actually on the cloud side. And now we need to read this information, the response back, and basically print it out to the console window. Let's modify this and switch it to an async. So let's go ahead and let's make that an async private task. There we go. And then we can just await everything and await that right there. There you go. And you can see it's saying that the game starts at 8 p.m. And we can try the cost one. You can see it's showing here 150 and it's showing here 8 p.m. So now that we have it working in the most simple form, let's go ahead and let's now codify all the rules that we want to specify. And if I were to do this from a programming perspective, I would be writing all the code to get all this stuff done. But what we're going to do here is we're going to do it very conversationally and let the AI figure out the formulas. So I'm basically going to just speak to it like as if I was speaking to a person, only in text form. So down here, we get rid of this because we're not going to be using all of it. So here are all the rules that we're going to be using. And given the fact that there are all these calculations, we are going to need to increase the number of tokens. So we're going to switch it from 800 to 1600 for the max tokens for the service. So let's go ahead and let's make that 1600. Let's now see the results here when we actually ask the questions. Who is the greatest of all time? All right, and here's our results. So let's take a look at it and pause it here. Okay. And at the bottom, you can see it says, based on the calculations we can perform with the provided data, LeBron James has the highest GOAT score of 590, making him the greatest basketball player of all time, according to your point system. However, please note that this is a simplified analysis and does not account for all aspects of a player's career or impact on the game. So, what if all the data is not available at the time when the model is trained? What do we do then? Well, in that scenario, what we're going to have to do is provide the data ourselves. To do that, we're going to need a storage location. So Azure Storage. We obviously will need a file that has the additional data. And that's going to go in here. Then we need some kind of search. In this case, we'll be using Azure Search, which will point to this data, um, do some processing of it, and basically expose some kind of index. And these values, the storage location, the index, um, and the search endpoint are the values that we're going to need in order to basically process this. And what we're essentially going to do is we're going to take all our code and pretty much everything that we've created up to this point, we're going to put it into a file, we're going to dump it into an Azure storage, and then we're going to set up all the infrastructure to allow us to search that storage location. So the first thing that we're going to need is we're going to need an actual storage account that we're going to be using for this. And we're going to put it basically in the same resource group. And we're pretty much not going to change anything else, just allow open access to it, just create the resource. And then we're going to create a container inside of that where we're going to be storing all our AI related content. Next, we're going to be creating an AI search service. So the search service basically allows us to search and index any files that are located inside of that container. And we can just give it a name. First of all, make sure it's in the right region. We want it in US East. And one thing to note is that over here, unfortunately, at this moment, this also is a shared, it's in a shared naming scope. So you're competing with everybody in the world because this is exposed as a URL. So whatever name that you specify here has to be unique to you for it to be allowed. Next is the scale. So basically, when you're picking your SKUs, please be mindful of the fact that certain tiers will now work for AI. The tier that I know for sure works is the standard tier. So over here, what's already specified here, standard, that tier actually works. So we're going to leave that alone. Networking, basically, this follows the same format. It's either public or it's private. If it's private, then you're going to have to use a private link, private endpoint. If it's public, then anybody can access it. And that creates our search. So we now have it, Think AI Search. So when it's time for you to basically connect to your own data, you'll see that over here where we previously had the prompt, there's this section here, add your data. So you'll basically click on that and then you click add data source. Now in here, you're going to pick from one of the many data sources that are available. So you'll see here that you have Azure AI Search, you have Blob Storage Preview, you have Cosmos DB, you have a web URL, and you have the ability to upload the files directly. Many of these ultimately will still boil down to you having to have Azure Search enabled and an index on it for it to work. So, it may say upload files, but implicitly when you upload the files, it's going to put it in a storage location, which then you have to specify the index, the search for that location, the index for it, and what have you. If you pick AI search, then it will ask you, well, within your AI search, what index do you want to use? If you pick blob storage, it'll specify the blob storage, but then you'll have to attach the index and whatnot to it. So you're kind of always working within the confines of creating search, creating an index, and then using that index to essentially search your files. So we're gonna pick mine goat storage, pick our container, and then as you can see here, we're now having to pick the um, search location. So even though we specified that we wanted to use blob storage up here, we still had to pick the storage location. We still had to pick the container, and we have to pick the actual search that we're going to use. And you can see down here that it's going to create an index inside of that search that will be used for actually doing the search. Down here in the indexer schedule, you have your choice of once, which means that it'll run one time, it'll index everything, and you're good. You can also pick between hourly and daily, in which case, if you're constantly updating your content, then you'd probably want to have daily or hourly or something of the sort, so that each day it does an index, and then you're basically all set for the remainder of that day. So we're going to pick Think Mind Search here, and then we now need to specify the index name that we're going to be using. And then we're going to say that we want to do it daily. You click your acknowledgement and you are all set. Search type is we want keywords. Got everything. Click save. And now what it's going to do is it's going to go through and it's going to ingest that data. And this, it takes a while. So while we're waiting, let's take a look at what actually got created and what we passed in here. It's just the same rules. The only difference is that I'm using top 25 um, and get it from here. So I'm basically pulling the stats from here, copying the whole thing from directly from ESPN, and I'm just pasting it into the document. This is fully loaded up now, so let's ask some questions to it. Now you can see that it's reading that straight from the document. That's where it's getting that information. So let's go ahead and let's create now a new class and let's interact with the service that we've just created. So we've tested it out. We see that it's working. So we're now going to create an advanced demo that basically leverages the capabilities that have been exposed. Now, there are differences between when you connect directly to the service, like the OpenAI service, and when you're connecting to the OpenAI service, but you're using your cognitive search and you're using your own data. The primary difference here is that you have to specify the index and the search that you're actually using. So they all work together. So here's the baseline that we have here. Basically, we're connecting to the same service that we previously connected to, but we do need some additional information now. First of all, let's connect OpenAI as before. But now we're going to need, as stated, the search endpoint, the search key, and we also need the index that we're going to be using. Right? And these we can pull directly from API. So if we go to search, so we're taking GOAT index, that's the search index name. And the search key we get from the key. Go down to the keys, and we can copy that. That's the search key. And the endpoint would be at the top here. There's the URL right up there. Right there. Okey-doke. So we have the information that we need to be able to reliably call this. So now let's take this whole code base and just copy it over and make some changes to it. So it's going to be called Advanced Code AI. And we're not going to need the knowledge anymore. We're not going to be using that. We are going to be using the extensions which are built into this. So it's going to be a new Azure Chat extension. And then within the extensions themselves, we are going to be using a cognitive search chat extension, the configuration for it. And then in here is where we're actually going to specify the index name, the key, and the search endpoint that we're going to be working off of. So we can pull the search endpoint. We have that up there already. So we just convert that to a URL. The index name we have up there as well. And the key we also have up there. And then for the query type, we want that to just be like a Azure Cognitive Search query type of simple. So let's go ahead and let's run that. Same questions we asked before. How many points have LeBron James scored? And here you can see that it's answered the question. And not only has it answered the question, it's also provided you with the location in the file where that is, right? So this means that it's referencing a document to pull that. So when you look in the Azure Portal UI, you'll actually see a reference link that you can pull in, and there are ways to pull those documents, but for the purpose of a console application, we don't necessarily need that. You can see that it's got Michael Jordan fourth in steals, which is correct, which is what was in the document. So there's no answer to that. And that's accurate. Okay, and now it can't calculate the GOAT score because it can't pull it out of the file. So this is just giving us the formula as we've specified. Let's see if we can calculate it based on 0. There we go. So we're calculating his GOAT score, and we're basically saying we use 0 in any category that he is not in, right? Which is how we want it anyways. So we have a GOAT score of 3 or 5 when we do that. So there you have it. Of course, the numbers that here are somewhat iffy. So the answer to the GOAT score question may not ever be answered, at least not in the limited time that we have here. But given the empirical data we have, we are able to use our Azure AI both using full OpenAI and using data that we provide ourselves through documents to calculate a GOAT score that we can use to answer these questions as we see fit.